The wan light of the red sun caught in the pupils of her eyes, trapped there for the longest time. Zozar marveled at the beauty, letting the sight seep into his every fiber, as though he could make the sensation last for eternity. Cleophasia's happiness was infectious. It lifted his spirit even in these uncertain times. She made it easier to ignore the tumors that riddled her body, drew his mind away from the polyps that punctuated his. There was no sickness in her gaze. They stood like that for a long time, it seemed, together on the slope of the Evermount overlooking the capital. The ruddy light washed over the pyramidal buildings of the city below, catching like lasers on capstones, dancing from one vertex to the next as a living thing, a monochrome zephyr that streamed along abandoned streets. All was quiet now. The rioters had no more strength, the rebels had been cowed, the disenfranchised infected no longer possessed the strength for upheaval. Zozar had wanted no part of it. What was the point of wasting the last of one's life in despair? The end came all the same, and Cleophasia had taught him that it was better to embrace what life there was than to spill it meagerly through one's fingers in bitterness and hostility. A tug at his tunic brought Zozar's attention down to his daughters, Azella and Issaris. The twins looked up at him, so pure, free of the sun curse. "Will it hurt, father?" asked Issaris. "The biotransferance?" "It will free us from pain, my dear," answered Cleophasia, while Zozar still contemplated the answer. He realized that the truth did not matter. His daughter was only seeking assurance, which their mother was so quick to provide. Zozar wished he had that easy emotion, to feel the situation rather than think about it. But then, it was the complexity of his intellect that Cleophasia said she loved, drawn to and celebrating their differences, of course. And her warmth passed to him so that sometimes, just sometimes, his engineer brain was set free from the shackles of logic and just floated on moments of joy. Moments like this one. "Will it hurt, though, father?" said Azella, the one never quite satisfied by her mother's answers. She was more like him, though possessed of a far more forgiving disposition. "You helped build it. You should know." He looked up at the Evermount and the great machine that had been erected at its summit. It was true that he had devised some of its angled walls and projecting antennae, stretching like hands towards the rising sun, but of its real workings he knew little. "I think it will tickle," he said, prodding both daughters to elicit squeals of shock and joy. Cleophasia's look of happiness intensified, and Zozar's heart throbbed with pride, knowing he had done well in her eyes. As nobility, albeit of low rank, they would be among the first to enter the biotransference halls. Zozar took his daughter's hands and led them up the marbled pathway, while other families gathered ahead at the gates. He realized he was trembling with excitement, and they could sense it too. So close to the end of the pain. Zozar could scarce believe that he had played a small part in the creation of their salvation. He was torn from his reverie by a strange sensation, like grit in his hands. He rubbed his fingers together, realizing he no longer held on to his children. It felt like sand falling from his palms. Zozar looked down at the two girls. Each was falling apart, slowly disintegrating into dull, ruddy crystals. Flesh became dust, slipping away from a shining metal skeleton beneath. He looked at his own hands, the gnarled, cancer-ridden digits falling on the breeze too. The sensation crept up his arm, freezing for a moment, leaving a chilled numbness in its wake. Cleophasia gasped in horror. He turned his eyes upon his beloved, but she looked back, not with eyes of love and warmth, but the cold red stare of optical lenses. All three had become animated statues, embodiments of death that he had labored hard to escape. The great machine was meant to free them from the burdens of the flesh, but not like this. His own body melted away, leaving unfeeling living metal.